From supreme grade swords to cursed swords to swords that are actually alive? These are the 15 strongest swords in One Piece. And let's start with the Soul Solid. Even though Soul Solid isn't a legendary or cursed blade by any measure, it's still a pretty cool weapon. We were introduced to it during the Thriller Bark arc when we saw Brook use it for the first time. When sheathed, this sword is pretty much just a cane and can also be used as a makeshift bow for Brook's violin. However, it's when it's unsheathed that things start getting interesting. Brook uses a graceful form of swordsmanship that emphasizes speed and precision. The majority of the techniques are named after songs and dances coupled with fencing terms. During the time skip, Soul Solid got sharpened by the members of the Long Arm tribe, which further increased its deadliness. Not only that, but Brook also learned to infuse his devil fruit powers into his sword, which allowed him to summon flames from the underworld that can freeze his opponents in place. Now, although this sword is really impressive, it hasn't really been able to make a name for itself quite yet, since Brook hasn't had a serious fight in a long time. But what we've seen so far is definitely enough to put it on the 15th place in this list. Oh, and by the way, in case you're wondering, for some reason, Oda, the creator of One Piece, drew what Soul Solid would look like if it was human, so here's that picture. There are still 14 incredibly strong blades left to cover, and let's continue with Kikoku. Law's sword, Kikoku, is confirmed to be a cursed blade, although its grade hasn't been revealed yet. Kikoku is a longer version of a Japanese katana. It has a hilt covered in white fur and a purple grip with white rings on it. It's also a really heavy sword, which Law obviously struggles to carry around with him everywhere. Hence, he holds it over his shoulder or hands it over for Beppo to lug around. You may have seen Law carrying out impossible feats like cutting mountains and ships with it, but most of that damage output comes from his devil fruit techniques rather than the sword itself. However, that doesn't mean that the sword is bad. For example, during his fight with Doflamingo, Law actually defended an attack from Doflamingo's strings without using his powers at all. Keep in mind that these attacks were able to cut through cement and debris like a butter, so the fact that Law was able to do this really showcases this sword's abilities. Anyway, same as with Soul Solid, Oda drew a human version of Kikoku. Anyway, this is what human Kikoku looks like. Number 13, Ryu. There's not a lot that can be said about Shiryu's sword, Ryu. The only thing we know for sure is that it's a Maito blade, which pretty much means that it's been crafted by a master swordsman and that it's wielded by a great swordsman. Shiryu has had this sword since his introduction during the Impel Down and has fought a lot of battles with it. He used it to successfully win against the Revolutionary Army and even defeat the remnants of the Whitebeard pirates. However, the most impressive thing this sword allowed Shiryu to do was put up against the monster of the previous generation, Garp, whom he managed to cut with it. In Shiryu's hands, Ryu is a tactical weapon, especially since he can use his Sukesuke no Mi's powers to render himself and the sword completely invisible. It has a fancy handguard with a half red, half white scabbard, a black hilt with a red diamond pattern, and a cool flower pattern on the base of the blade. So, you know how in the intro I mentioned that some swords are actually alive? Well, the next sword on the list is what I meant by that. Big Mom's Napoleon is a weird sword. It was made by Big Mom using her devil fruit by infusing a part of her soul inside the weapon, which brought it to life. It's a very powerful and capable blade that can come to its master's defense when called out. When not in use, Napoleon assumes the form of a pirate hat, with a sentient Jolly Roger on its base. It's also a sword with a lot of personality, with 4 different forms it can switch into, including a cutlass, a sea axe, a longsword, and a gladius. Despite it not being your usual graded blade, this sword is extremely powerful, and can even tank full-on swings from Kaido's hockey-infused club. Big Mom can also use her other homies to increase her sword's attack output, incorporating elemental attacks like fireballs and lightning. It can even be used to launch concentrated lasers. This, in combination with its 4 different forms, makes this sword an incredibly versatile weapon, perfect for any situation. Number 11, Kogarashi and Oto. Kogarashi and Oto are Shiki's 2 swords, and although they are only used for walking these days, in his prime, these weapons were a big reason why he was considered one of the strongest pirates in the previous era. Kogarashi and Oto can deliver air slashes, and Shiki can also use them to finally cut something like water in order to make it levitate with his Fua Fua no Mi. The precise grade of these swords is not known, but according to Shiki, they were rather famous back in the day. Although we don't know much about them, the fact that Shiki was able to hold his ground against the likes of Roger, Garp, and Sengoku must mean that they are incredibly powerful blades. It even took the combined efforts of Sengoku and Garp, 2 of the strongest Marines, to take Shiki down in his prime. 5 done, 10 more to go, and let's continue the list with one of the first swords we we've seen in the show, Wado Ichimonji. Wado Ichimonji is one of Zoro's 3 current swords. It was passed down for generations in the Shimotsuki family until Zoro inherited it from his master to fulfill a promise to his daughter, Kuina. It was forged in Wano by the legendary swordsmith Shimotsuki Kozuburo. Wado Ichimonji is also the first sword on the list that we actually know the grade of, being one of 21 great graded blades. Tashigi, a sword fanatic, described it as a magnificent katana of the highest caliber, not accepting the fact that such a famous blade was in the hands of someone like Zoro. Zoro keeps this blade safe in his mouth during his fights and values it more than his own life. The Wado Ichimonji is surprisingly robust, as it's tanked several heavy hits, including the beating Zoro received from Mihawk. The sword is also powerful enough to cut through steel, and it even allowed Zoro to cut through Kaido's seemingly impenetrable skin, albeit while being coated in haki. And in case you were wondering, yes, Oda drew a human version of it too. Number 9, Shusui. Shusui is one of the 21 great grade swords that exist in the world of One Piece. It's a blade Zoro got his hands on from the legendary hero of Wano, Ryuma, and is considered to be a national treasure to the people of Wano. Ryuma used Shusui hundreds of years ago to slay a real dragon, a being that we can assume had skin as tough as Kaido's. Shusui is also the first black blade on the list. Black blades are much stronger and more resilient than the regular blades, and it's said that they wouldn't bend an inch, even if a dinosaur stepped on them. Although we don't know how exactly a blade becomes black, it most likely happens as a result of countless battles and the user's mastery of armament haki. The grade of a blade is also increased if it's turned black. Anyways, back to Shusui. One of the first things Zoro noticed about the blade is that it's really heavy, much heavier than his previous swords. It also has the distinct trait of increasing its wielder's destructive power. In fact, the sword's power is so destructive that Zoro noted that if his fight against Ryuma continued, Shusui would break his other swords. The only problem with this blade is that due to how heavy it is, it's much harder to control compared to other swords. However, with enough training, one can learn to use it efficiently, as shown when Zoro managed to cut a massive ship in half after the time skip. Number 8, Ame no Habakiri. Ame no Habakiri was one of the swords wielded by Kozuki Oden. It's a great grade blade crafted by Kozuki Sukiyaki. It's a sword that represents the heavens, and that theme is perfectly conveyed through its white sheath and handle, along with the gold flower motifs. According to its creator, Ame no Habakiri could slice through the heavens. The late Oden used this sword to achieve some incredible feats, like cutting through Kaido's impenetrable skin and even defeating the mountain god. This sword has also clashed with supreme grade weapons as well, like Roger's and Whitebeard's weapons, which really goes to show just how dependable it actually is. Since Oden's death, it didn't see much action, and it's mostly a showpiece and keepsake for the new shogun, Momonosuke. Number 7, Enma. Enma was Oden's second sword that he wielded alongside Ame no Habakiri, and was eventually passed down to Princess Hiyori. It's classified as a great grade blade. Same as Wado Ichimonji, Enma was created by Wano's legendary swordsmith Kozuburo, who said that Enma is his best masterpiece, stronger than all other swords he has forged. Contrary to Ame no Habakiri, which represents the heavens, Enma is described to be capable of cutting through to the bottom of hell. Although both of Oden's swords are insanely powerful, according to Kozuburo, Enma is seemingly superior when it comes to attacking power and cutting strength. After Oden's death, this sword eventually found its way to Zoro, who traded his other blade, Shusui, for it. Contrary to other swords, Enma is known to release massive amounts of haki from the user wielding it, which makes the sword pretty much impossible to control. After testing it out, Zoro cut off a cliffside, despite intending to only cut down a tree, because of Enma's incredible power. However, after mastering it, Zoro was able to use the sword's full strength to cut Kaido and leave a permanent scar on him, just like Oden did in the past. He later went on to battle King with it, and eventually defeated the Lunarian. Considering Enma isn't a black blade yet, it means that if Zoro managed to turn it black, its grade will increase, which would make it one of the supreme grade swords. Since Zoro is aiming to become the world's strongest swordsman by the end of the show, he is bound to do this sooner or later, which will significantly increase Enma's power. So far, we haven't had a single supreme grade sword on the list, but that's all about to change now, as the last 6 weapons are all supreme grade blades. And let's start with the one most people usually overlook, the Yakuza Kaizen. The Yakuza Kaizen is the first confirmed supreme grade blade on the list, which makes it one of the 12 strongest swords in existence. It's currently wielded wielded by the Marine Admiral Fujitora, but we have no idea how he has acquired this legendary weapon. The Yakuza Kaisen is a cane sword that looks simple. There aren't any embellishments on the blade, and it pretty much mirrors the look of an actual wooden cane. Not only that, but the blade is completely straight and is mostly used for defense instead of offense by Fujitora, since he holds it with a reverse grip. Even though we don't know who exactly forged this blade, we know it's someone from the Fujitsu family, a powerful family from Wano country. Although Fujitora doesn't use it that often, we've seen him use it once against Zoro, when he easily deflected the attack from Zoro's Shusui. Other times, he mostly uses it in a combination with his devil fruit powers to perform gravity-based attacks. With one swing of his sword, Fujitora can create powerful gravity waves to send his opponents flying or even create vertical waves to pin them to the ground. Number 5. Murakumegiri. Arguably one of the most well-recognized weapons in One Piece, the Murakumegiri is a long spear-like weapon with a black blade at the top. It was wielded by the legendary pirate and the Emperor of the Sea, Whitebeard, and has aided him in many battles against some of the most powerful fighters in the world. Murakumegiri is a supreme-grade weapon, although it isn't known who forged it. Whitebeard usually used this weapon to inflict damage on his enemies from a distance, and it was even used to channel his Gura Gura no Mi. Whitebeard had this weapon for a really long time, even back when he was a part of Rock's crew. Throughout the years, he clashed with some of the strongest characters in history, and the blade never seemed to suffer any damage from those battles. Even in his old age, the blade was still in perfect condition, which goes on to show just how durable it is. When used in conjunction with either Whitebeard's devil fruit or armament haki, Murakumegiri's power is increased to a much greater extent, capable of neutralizing any potential devil fruit defense its opponents may possess. It's truly one of the most magnificent weapons in the entire show and deserves the 5th place. Number 4, Griffin. Griffin is Shanks' sword, and although we know nothing about it, it's a blade that we can't overlook. This sword features a really simple design. It has a green hilt and a gold circular handguard. Despite its lack of ranking, Griffin's power is easily comparable to other supreme grade blades. In the past, Shanks has fought against many strong opponents with strong blades of their own, like Mihawk and Whitebeard, and has always been able to match their strength. The sword is also especially durable, and was able to tank a hit from a Kainu's magma punch without decaying even the slightest bit. When it comes to offense, Shanks mostly uses it to deliver devastating hockey-infused attacks that produce shockwaves strong enough to shake even the entire battleships. The only serious attack we saw Shanks perform with this sword is Divine Departure, a powerful slash infused with Conqueror's Haki, which destroyed Kid and his entire crew in seconds. There's no history regarding how Shanks was able to acquire this legendary weapon, although we know it's been in his possession ever since the story's first chapter. However, most importantly, Griffin also has a humanized drawing of it, courtesy of Oda. And yeah, it's not as cool as you would expect. Before we cover the 3 strongest swords in the entire series, I just wanted to quickly mention Nidai Kitetsu. It's that blade Luffy borrowed during the Wano Arc. Although we've never seen it in action, we know it's one of the great grade blades, and it's also cursed, same as other blades from the Kitetsu series. It definitely deserves a place somewhere on this list, but since we know literally nothing about it, I'll leave it only as an honorable mention for now. Number 3, Shodai Kitetsu. Shodai Kitetsu is the only supreme grade blade from the Kitetsu series, which makes it far deadlier and more durable than the other 2 Kitetsu swords. Although officially we've never seen this sword in the show, a lot of evidence suggests that Shodai Kitetsu is actually a sword wielded by Nasjuro, one of the 5 elders. Just like Sandai and Nidai, Nasjuro's sword also has a gold cross-shaped guard, which is pretty strong evidence that they belong to the same sword series. Also, knowing that Shodai Kitetsu is a supreme grade blade, it makes sense that Nasjuro, one of the most powerful swordsmen in the world, would be the one to wield it. With it, Nasjuro can split objects in seconds, and uses it in conjunction with his powers that grant him an immense amount of speed. In his awakened state, Nasjuro can use his haki to further amplify his sword's range by using devastating slash attacks. Another important thing to mention is that Nasjuro managed to turn his sword black, which we know increases the sword's power even further. If the Shodai Kitetsu is indeed the same sword we saw being used at Egghead, then Zoro might be in for a tough battle. Before we cover the absolute strongest sword in the entire show, let's first quickly go over Ace. Whether he named his son after his sword is a debate for another video, but Gol D. Rogers' sword Ace was surely one of the strongest swords we have ever seen. Ace is a really simple sword that really gives off that pirate vibe. It's also a supreme grade blade, one of the strongest weapons ever created, rivaled only by a couple of weapons in the entire world. Using it, Roger was able to inflict an immeasurable amount of damage on his opponents. Same as Shanks, Roger mostly used this weapon in combination with his Conqueror's Haki, with his only named attack being Divine Departure. Roger had this sword for a long time. Oh, we even saw him wielding it 38 years ago during the God Valley incident. However, since his execution, it's unknown what became of Ace. One possibility is that the government seized it, but it's also possible that right before turning himself in, Roger gave the blade to somebody to keep it safe. Well, at least we have a picture of what it would have looked like as a human. Number 1. Yoru. Yoru needs no introduction. It's a supreme grade blade wielded by the undisputed GOAT, the world's greatest swordsman, Dracule Mihawk. It's a weapon with tons of embellishments, resembling a crucifix. The blade is also comically large, even larger than Mihawk himself. Through the continuous use of his Haki, Mihawk has successfully turned the blade black, and can use it to perform many impressive feats like cutting huge warships as if they were made out of butter. Yoru's swings can unleash massive shockwaves that can travel long distances while retaining their slicing power, even hundreds of meters away. Yet, despite this destructive power, Yoru is also gentle enough for Mihawk to precisely alter the course of bullets with a slight touch of the blade. The blade has seen its fair share of combat, most notably during the time when Mihawk and Shanks would engage in their legendary duels, and even prior to that when Mihawk was known as the Marine Hunter. Despite how legendary Yoru is, Oda decided to troll the fans by drawing its human form like this.